is live from the COD. You guys already know what time it is. So, what's going on, Jeff? How's everything going today?
As you would say, feeling good, feeling great. Hump day Wednesday, a little change of pace. Reached out to you this morning. Glad to be on, obviously. We do the bet exchange on Tuesday. Usually try to do either one of our channels on Thursday or Friday. I had an opportunity this afternoon before the closing bell after this. So fun to talk some sports. Fun to talk some NBA or whatever you got on the docket. So let's go.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the first topic that I have in hand, and it's going to be about the CFP. Jeff, we got the CFP rankings week 3. I don't think things changed that much, but from what I'm seeing right now, is it looks like we still have Ohio State sitting at the top, and then you still got Georgia, who's looks like they moved up. You have to move Georgia up. Georgia just got done destroying the number 9 team in the nation. So we have to recognize that, because that's a big win. That's a one-up win. But Ohio State, they really can't flex beating up on a sorry ass Michigan State team that's really hapless at this moment. And you know what? They've kind of thrown away, they kind of threw in the season once they fired their coach. You know what I mean? So we know that. So I see Georgia's back at number 1. And I've said this the whole time, Jeff, and you know this, that Georgia should have never not been the number 1 team. When you've won back-to-back national championships, what are we doing here? We don't. The committee doesn't have to be so, okay, we're going by strength of schedule. Let's be realistic and hand it to the actual champion. You got to beat the champ to be the champ, because they'll be there. Your thoughts on Georgia taking back the number 1 spot?
Well, they started the year 4-0 and they didn't cover a game. Then in came someone 14 and a half point favorites. Kentucky, I think, was the first one that woke them up. They destroyed Kentucky. Then 2 weeks later, I think they had Missouri 14 and a half. They destroyed. Was it Missouri?
You thinking about the Florida game? The Florida game changed
Yes.
everything.
Yeah. Kentucky, then Florida. Those were the two 14 and a half point spreads. I'm looking at this picture here, and then Brock Bowers is back, who will probably be a top 5 in the draft, and we'll be trying to compare his draft stock to Kyle Pitts of a few years ago. We could talk just for an hour on this show about the potential popsicle headache, because we usually know this. It happened a few years ago, Pops. We're heading for a collision course here with Georgia and Alabama, who lost, I think, in week 4 to Texas, but they have been ascending since. And Texas has a loss to Oklahoma since as well. But the last time these two played in an SEC championship, Georgia was undefeated. Alabama had 1 loss. So it was a must win for Alabama to get into the Final Four. And Georgia knew, even with a loss, that they were still going to be in the Final Four and get an opportunity for the rematch. They didn't open up the full playbook. Long story short, they lose to Alabama. They come back and win the national championship. The problem this year, Pops, is you got Ohio State and Michigan, who play in next week. I think it is next week. And the fact of the matter is, whoever wins that game is going to win the Big Ten championship. They're in.
Right.
Florida State doesn't look like it's going to lose. Even though people say, well, the ACC is down, Florida State still beat LSU opening day. They went into Clemson and they beat Clemson. They will have had to beat, I think, Florida and Miami as well. And my point here, Pops, is you still have an undefeated Washington team and you have a 1-loss Oregon team. So, we'll probably spend a whole show at some point just talking about this. My thought is there's going to be 1 SEC team in, 1 Big Ten team in, an undefeated Florida State team has to be in. And then you're going to say, well, if Georgia loses, they're 2-time defending champs with 1 loss to Alabama. You'll be talking about a 1-loss Ohio State or Michigan team. And then you could be talking about 2 1-loss Washington and Oregon teams. And then we still haven't even talked about a Texas 1-loss team who went into Tuscaloosa week 4 and won. So it's a popsicle headache, Pops.
Right. And I think in any scenario, if everybody finishes with, say, a loss at the end of the year, except for Georgia or somebody like that, or just Georgia loses, everybody loses. You know what I mean? I think what happens here is that you really have to go ahead and evaluate, do we add the Pac-12 team in here just because the Pac-12 is about to go out? That's what I know what they're looking at. They want to have it for the first time in a long time to where all the conferences are represented. They don't want to do the two-for deal again, because last year they left out the SEC. They brought in the Big Ten. It wound up being a flop because you still got a Big 12 SEC championship. I think this year they want to kind of put the variety to this situation as well. But I know it's tough for them to put Washington in the top four, because what has Washington played other than Oregon? Yeah, they beat USC, but USC is seen as a dumpster fire at this moment. They've lost 4 games in a row. But all of USC's losses are good losses. That's what the problem is. You know what I mean? Utah, good. You're not losing to a bad team. The Oregon loss, you didn't lose to a bad team. The loss to Washington, that was a topsy-turvy back and forth game. You didn't lose to a bad team. You lost to all the top teams in the conference. So they do have that in their crowd somewhat. And then I look at the rest of this group and I say, who's on the outside looking in that can do something in this group? And I say that Louisville, don't even think about it. Don't even try to attack that angle. But I'll say this, though. I think that a team like Oregon State could possibly rear their ugly head into this situation, but they're probably not going to get a chance to play. Let me look at Oregon State's schedule real quick.
They play Washington this week on Saturday.
Back to back. So if they were to beat both of those teams, do you think that they would be able to get some type of look into this situation as well, too, even with 2 losses?
See, that's the problem. You said the 2 word here. And we in August gave out Washington to win the Pac-12 and to make the Final Four, which everyone laughed at us. And they were leaking oil after the Oregon win. Now they've kind of, picked up the pace again. They're 2-point favorites at Oregon State. I think Oregon State gets them. And then I'm assuming, though, a 1-loss Washington team still going to get into the Pac-12 finals. So my point is does the committee have the audacity? Let's just play a game here, Pops. I don't care who wins let's say Michigan beats Ohio State. Michigan's in. Florida State stays undefeated. They're in. So that's 2, right? Alabama beats Georgia. Alabama's in. That's 3. So that 4th spot is going to say, all right, how do you leave a 2-time defending champ, Georgia, who just had SEC championship loss, let's say 31-30? How do you leave them out and put an Oregon team who won the Pac-12? Let's say championship. Let's say Texas won the Pac-12 championship. That's where the committee's got to step in and say, guys, this year, championships mean something. So if Texas wins the Big 12 and Oregon wins the Pac-12 and Georgia's outside looking in without an SEC championship, the committee's going to have its hands full. And then I know everyone's going to say, this is why we needed 12, yada, yada, yada. But I'll ask you this question, Pops. Texas Sheets wins the Big 12. Oregon Sheets wins the Pac-12. Georgia loses in a tight game to Alabama. Who gets the 4th spot?
We know what time it is. They're gonna hand it over to Georgia, because there's no way that they're not going to give to Georgia, because Georgia can redeem themselves. That's the thing. And you would just be doing a pageantry, a nice gesture, adding a Pac-12 team. The Pac-12 has already shown that they weren't capable of really dealing with this. They threw Washington in the Final Four. They got absolutely motorboated, like you love to say, Jeff. They got absolutely just sent to the yard. But as you said, we can talk about this. Go ahead.
Oregon is legit this year. Yes. Oregon is legit. So my point is, if Oregon cheats and their only loss was in the last second to Washington on a missed field goal, I think they deserve to get in. But I think you're spot on because everyone wants to kick out Florida State, ACC's down, even though they're undefeated. They beat LSU the first game of the year. There's no way Florida State doesn't get in. So my
Right.
point, I think you're right, by the way. I think they will put Georgia in. And unfortunately, you got a Texas team who went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama with a Big 12 championship, and they're outside looking in as well. It's going to get ugly.
Right. And it's because the Oklahoma loss doesn't age well. Because Oklahoma comes out, it's not that Oklahoma lost one, they lost two in a row. And that's where it's like, okay, Texas might have just caught Alabama on a bad weekend. If they were to play this game again, Alabama probably beats them by double digits. Let's keep it real. There were mistakes made. And if we played it again, that's how, if I was a part of the committee, that's how I'm looking at this situation as well, too. If I put these teams on the field again, does Texas beat them? And you will probably say no. So that's where, so it's fun. And see, this is why we need to move on to the next subject, because this one right here will turn the show from the primetime angles into the CFP rankings prediction. I was about to go through all the teams, but there's no point. Do you think Tulane should be a New Year's Eve team? Just real quick, give me 30 seconds on that answer.
No, I think they're living on last year's. No, they're not the same team. No.
Okay. I'm with you on that one. I think that the only way they had even an inkling of that thought was beating Ole Miss. They didn't beat Ole Miss, and since you didn't beat Ole Miss, you can't be at the table. It's just that simple. All right, and the AAC has became a middling conference. It's not. It doesn't have enough team power, star team power to say anything. You don't have the Cincinnati's, the Houstons of the world in there anymore. UCF, they're all gone. They're all in the Big 12. All your major teams are gone. That's why it's like, okay, Tulane, you don't really have much of a conversation. You truly don't, because your conference has turned back into the old Conference USA that you came from the first time. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about tonight's MAC game of the night, and that's going to be between